Hi, I'm Adriana, an associate CMO here at Kalungi, and I'm going to talk to you today about branding. If you're thinking about creating a new brand or undergoing a rebrand, we have some great resources to help you get started. There's a brand survey, so feel free to download it once you're done watching this video. So branding can mean many things to different people. It can be your logo, it can be the name of your brand, it can be your brand colors, your website, it can even be the reputation or just the feeling of your brand. So it's really important to first off define what branding means to you when you're trying to come up with a rebranding project with your team, because everybody can be on different pages and you want to make sure you're aligned and you're talking about the same thing. So it's also important when you're creating a new brand or undergoing a rebrand to decide what your goal is. You should never do a rebrand if you don't really need one, because it requires a lot of work. It also changes, what you look like to your audience, and if you have an established platform, you may not want to do that, and it may not make you as recognizable as you were before, which is fine as long as the goal that you're trying to achieve is more important. So if you're trying to keep up with your competition, then I think it's fair for you to really undergo a rebrand at that point. I think that's a fair point, and oftentimes you'll see big brands like Instagram and Google's different brands like Gmail, they'll undergo brand refreshes every so often to make sure that they're not going out of date. When considering a rebrand, it's important to think about what goals you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to look bigger than your competition? Are you trying to appeal to a smaller audience? Are you trying to modernize your brand? All these different approaches will take you down a different path. So it's really important to solidify and align with your team what you are doing this rebrand for. It also requires a lot of time and effort from many people on your team, design, content, all of leadership. So you want to make sure that the goal you're trying to achieve is important enough for everyone to be putting their time and effort towards it. Branding is also not very black and white, so it can be difficult for people to make branding decisions without knowing what the goal is. So having this, hey, we're trying to modernize our brand. People know when they're making their decisions, even if they're not creative, that they're looking for design aspects that are going to make them look more modern than before, and that will help guide them and hopefully guide you as the CEO in making the right decisions. Another thing to keep in mind when undergoing a rebrand or creating a new brand is not to get lost in the details. A lot of branding is truly subjective. There's no right, there's no wrong. So overthinking, a logo or a color or anything like that is not necessary. In my opinion, I think you can really go with almost your gut feeling at that point, because choosing red over orange isn't going to have a dramatic effect on your business. It's really just the overall look and feel of your brand, and if it goes well with your brand words and your brand voice, and you have a great and talented designer who's going to create a brand style guide that's going to combine the colors that you choose well, and your logo and your name and the typography all looks modern and great. At the end of the day, what you want is an amazing look and feel of your company, and whether that's going with red or orange doesn't really matter at that point. So getting lost in those tedious little pieces isn't something that you should really waste your time on. The important thing is that you make a decision, you stick with the decision, and you don't get lost in the details. For startups, I always recommend going with simple branding. Oftentimes your team, you don't have a large team of designers, so it's going to really be your leadership team, your product team, your customer success team that's going to need to put together materials. So keeping the branding as simple as possible is going to make it a lot easier for everyone to apply the branding onto any materials that they create and keep it consistent and modern. And this doesn't just apply for startups, it can apply for bigger companies as well. If you look at Apple, their branding is completely simple and sophisticated, and it looks extremely modern, and they're one of the biggest companies. So simple is always better, in my opinion, when trying to create a new brand or even rebranding and trying to have a more modern feel. When you try to get a little too complex in your color coordination or your logos, it can look crowded and outdated very easily and very quickly. Something that I encounter often when I'm talking to CEOs is they always want their brand to mean something, or they want their brand to be exactly, portray exactly the services or products that they provide. And that's not necessarily the case. Some of the biggest brands in the world have some logos that have nothing to do with their company, and that's completely fine. So when you're coming up with your logo or your name or even, the look and feel of your website, it doesn't need to translate verbatim the services and products that you provide. It's okay if it's a little bit elusive, and it's almost better that way in case you need to, open up your product into new markets or new audiences. It allows you that flexibility. For example, if you use a construction hat as your logo and you decide to branch outside of construction, then you're gonna have to undergo a whole rebrand all over again. So in order to ensure longevity, think about the flexibility of your brand and your logo and your name and your colors. All great brands eventually pivot into new markets and new audiences. So ensuring that your brand is flexible now will save you a lot of time and effort in the future. If you're scrambling for ideas and you're not sure where to get inspiration, make sure to take a look around at different brands, but I recommend looking at brands that aren't from your direct competitors. Oftentimes your competitors end up copying each other, so what you see is just different versions of the same thing. I really challenge you to go outside your comfort zone and look at brands in different industries, look at bigger brands, look at inspirational brands, wacky brands, more serious brands. Looking at a broad variety of brands is really going to help you round out what you want to see in your brand, and it's okay if it's different than your competitors. Actually, you want that. You want to stand out. So taking a risk here and there can really pay off in the future. Remember, it takes time for people to love branding, so you may meet some resistance, but don't let it discourage you. It's all part of the process. If you're thinking about creating a new brand or undergoing a rebrand, feel free to click on the link below and download our free brand survey.